Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be reviewing the DC animated movie Justice League Warworld. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I post film, book, and TV series reviews. I do opinion pieces on entertainment, news, and affairs. I'm also an author of adult and young adult mystery novels. To date, I've released 3 books, The Women in White, The Lethal List, and most recently, Textbook Murder. They're all on sale now, and there are purchase links in my video description below. With that in mind, and without further ado, welcome to my spoiler-filled review of Justice League Warworld. Until now, the Justice League has been a loose association of superpowered individuals. But when they are swept away to Warworld, a place of unending, brutal, gladiatorial combat, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and the others must somehow unite to form an unbeatable resistance able to lead an entire planet to freedom. Yeah, I'm not gonna dance around it. This was not a good movie, and I did not like it. Primarily because it failed on nearly every level as a Justice League film, a DC Comics film, and even a film, period. I'd be remiss if I didn't begin this review with the disclaimer that I have never been a fan of the Tomorrowverse. For those of you who don't know, the Tomorrowverse is the unofficial name for the sweep of interconnected DC animated movies that started with 2020's Superman, Man of Tomorrow, and that have continued up until Justice League Warworld. The Tomorrowverse was intended to replace the DC animated movie universe that began with 2014's Justice League War and ended with 2019's Justice League Dark Apocalypse War. Now that shared universe had its own problems: short runtimes, poor animation, poor designs, and basic storytelling, to name a few. But the Tomorrowverse has just been so much worse. There have been exceptions to the rule, like Justice Society World War II and Batman The Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2. Those weren't great films, but they were pretty good. But otherwise, Tomorrowverse films have generally just been dumpster fires. The animation and voice casting have been great, but the plots and the writing have ranged from lackluster to atrocious. There does seem to be some sort of overarching plan to build up to Crisis on Infinite Earths. That was teased with the Psycho Pirate storyline in Justice Society World War II, and even more so throughout and at the end of this movie. But other than that, the writers of these Tomorrowverse films have done the worst job at creating a cohesive narrative amongst them. Characters and concepts and plots get thrown into these movies or are implied to have been established in between them with zero build-up or explanation. For instance, Superman Man of Tomorrow is an origin story for Clark Kent's Superman. During that movie, it's implied that other heroes exist in this universe, and Superman even meets Martian Manhunter. In Justice Society World War II, he meets the Flash, and the Flash suggests the idea of forming a team of heroes to combat crime on a larger level. Batman The Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2 happen sometime later. The Flash is shown at the end of Part 2 to be partners with Green Arrow. He's implied to be involved in the Justice League, which was apparently formed off-screen, and he apparently wants to recruit Batman. Then, in Green Lantern Beware My Power, the Justice League is fully formed and comprised of old pro heroes who are all best friends. Hal Jordan has come and gone as the greatest Green Lantern. He has a whole backstory of friendship with the Justice League and Green Arrow, and it all happened off-screen. Like Legion of Superheroes, Superman has off-screen established a major trusting relationship with Batman and the Legion, and with Supergirl, who has arrived on Earth and become his sidekick since his last and only real film appearance in Superman Man of Tomorrow. It is so frustrating how these films often skip probably years of necessary story development in order to get to the next big thing. When I watched most of these movies, it felt as if I'd missed 5 films worth of content between each one. It makes you wonder why the creatives are even trying to meld these stories into a cohesive universe instead of maybe just presenting the Tomorrowverse as a series of unrelated standalone tales that adapt interesting comic book arcs. Anyway, off my soapbox. With that context in mind, I stand fully convinced that Justice League Warworld is the worst Tomorrowverse film to date. Even worse than Green Lantern Beware My Power, and believe me, that's saying something. First and foremost, this movie did not live up to its premise. There was no real gladiatorial combat whatsoever. It's marketed as a Justice League origin story in which Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and other Leaguers are trapped on Warworld and must transform a loosely defined Justice League into a united resistance to liberate themselves and Warworld's other captives. And that sounds like a terrific logline. But what we got instead were 3 underwhelming short stories that converged into an even more underwhelming head-scratcher of a final act that fumbled the ball, as well as all sense of storytelling logic. With Wonder Woman, we got a cliched and unimaginative Western whose only real break with the general Western tradition was that the heroic cowboy was a superhuman amnesiac female instead of a hardened human male. My biggest gripe with this segment was Jonah Hex's misuse as the villain. I have absolutely abhorred that storytelling device since I first saw it employed in the Arrowverse's Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2. Jonah Hex is surly and cynical with a poor reputation and personality, but the character has always, in the comics, been bound by a personal honor code to protect and avenge the innocent. He is, simply put, an anti-hero, not a monster, and his portrayal here as a ruthless murderer who terrorizes an entire town and slaughters good people for money-related reasons falls flatter than a pancake on a skillet with a false bottom. With Batman, we get an equally cliched and unimaginative Conan the Barbarian style story, with Bruce Wayne as an amoral amnesiac mercenary brute who's thrust into an adventure in Skartaris with Warlord and some other lackeys as they quest to find and kill Warlord's sworn enemy, Deimos, a so-called wizard who uses magic and super science to brutally rule Skartaris. With Superman, we get probably the most cliched and unimaginative of all 3 short stories, a 1950s alien horror movie that's a nearly direct ripoff of the Twilight Zone's Superior episode called Will the Real Martian Please Stand Up, and it features Clark Kent as a government agent investigating an alien invasion. Each of these period pieces has its good moments, like the action of Wonder Woman's fights against Jonah Hex and his men, the team up between Bruce and Warlord, some of the nostalgia and the winks, the little winks towards what I believe is a Batman Paleolithic story that was done in the comics a little while ago, which portrayed Batman as an amnesiac brute in the Paleolithic era and fighting his way through time. The way that Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman slowly uncover the mystery of their own identities is also pretty good here. But globally, the stories and the action in the 3 segments there were all so bland and so uninspired and so repetitive. Then the 3 short stories ran into a final act that just destroyed the whole movie. We learn that Warworld is actually a sophisticated machine capable of interdimensional travel, that it's powered by the fear of its captives, that the Martians of another dimension hold a nebulously defined key to unleashing Warworld's true power, that Mongol couldn't find that key, and that Mongol has decided to settle for going across the multiverse to capture individuals and harvest their fear for Warworld's power. He has a small army of white Martians from the dimension, including the Martians who supposedly held the key, to help him operate Warworld, and they captured a Martian manhunter from, I believe, that same dimension to help them enslave the other individuals they capture on Warworld in psychic scenarios created to bring out their fear so that it can be harvested as power for Warworld. As the original individuals die over the years, they're cloned so that the process can start all over again. Mongol captured Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman like he's apparently captured billions of other people over time. Batman and Superman are from the main Tomorrowverse universe, though Wonder Woman is from an alternate universe with an older Superman, probably and possibly the universe from Justice Society World War II. The 3 period pieces were psychic illusions during which Martian Manhunter fed Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman psychic clues to help them escape so that they could free him and help him to overthrow Mongol and destroy Warworld. Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman never fully regain their memories, but free Martian Manhunter and help him fight Mongol, the White Martians, and Lobo, who shows up out of nowhere as Mongol's ally. Lobo double-crosses Mongol to take control of Warworld himself with some psychic prodding by Martian Manhunter, who reveals that for whatever reason the key to controlling Warworld's full power is in the combined DNA of white and green Martians. Martian Manhunter controls a white Martian and merging with him, creating the key and using it to make Warworld self-destruct. Manhunter is okay with killing probably billions of innocent people, cloned or otherwise, who were enslaved on Warworld because the plot calls for it. Then Harbinger shows up out of nowhere to save Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman from the self-destructing Warworld. She takes them to a satellite elsewhere in space and tells them that the depths on Warworld make no difference to anything, and that the 3 of them are needed to help avert what will amount to the crisis on Infinite Earths. So you see what I mean. This movie's final act is totally out of left field. The action scenes are garbage. We get the shallowest version of Mongol and Warworld put to screen. The ending is whiplash-inducingly abrupt, and there's little sense of resolution to any of it. The final act renders every minute of the 3 period pieces an immaterial waste of time when it becomes clear that none of those stories matter because they were all Westworld-style fabrications. And that narrative choice by the writers was total disrespect of the audience that watched those stories and wasted time being invested in them. Lastly, this movie doesn't even technically qualify as a Justice League movie. It's really more of a Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman movie featuring an alternate dimension Wonder Woman and a probably alternate dimension Martian Manhunter. On the one hand, I understand the reason for the mistitle. DC Comics doesn't have a recognizable brand name for the Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman trinity. Naming the movie after all 3 of those characters would have been too tedious, and naming it after 1 or 2 of them would have been even worse false advertising than the title that was ultimately used. But be that as it may, this movie's writers are still not off the hook because they put themselves in this position. They didn't have to make this movie when they did, and they really shouldn't have either. They should have waited, established an actual Justice League in the Tomorrowverse, then done a more proper Justice League film based around that actual Justice League. Yeah. Now, there are 2 good things that I will give this movie, credit where it's due. The animation was spot on like usual in the Tomorrowverse, and so was most of the voice casting. Darren Criss's Superman and Stana Katic's Wonder Woman remain solid standouts. Teddy Sears as Warlord, Robin Atkin Downes as Mongol, and John DiMaggio as Lobo also work very well here. And it's a crying shame how badly those last 2 were wasted on this movie. Robin Atkin Downes in particular. He was born to play these menacing villain roles, and it felt like he gave his all here as Mongol, but the material was just so unequal to the talent of the man. I haven't been a fan of Jensen Ackles' Batman, and I'm still not. I know there are many people who disagree, and maybe it's just that I'm too familiar with his voice as that of Dean from Supernatural or Soldier Boy from The Boys, but he's just never quite fit to me as the voice of a Batman, or even Jason Todd for that matter. But that's a personal opinion, and it isn't intended to cast any shade on him or the quality of his performance in this movie. Alright, so brass tacks. Justice League Warworld is a misleadingly titled, ill-conceived, horribly written disaster, 3/4 of which make no nevermind to its own narrative. The entire movie makes little difference to the Tomorrowverse itself, and the final act is chock so full of lackluster action scenes and convoluted exposition dumping that it's impossible to enjoy. It includes the worst ever adaptations of Mongol and Warworld set to screen, and its ending is the Merriam-Webster definition of unsatisfying. Honestly, this came out like almost 2 decades ago now, but the episodes of the Bruce Timm Justice League series which tackled Warworld and adapted it for the DC universe that Bruce Timm created, actually did this story so much better than this movie did, and this movie had a better budget and probably more time. Justice League Warworld is the worst movie in the Tomorrowverse, the worst Justice League film made, and likely also the worst DC Comics movie of at least the past decade. I give Justice League Warworld a half a cronut out of 5, and that's being way more generous than it deserves, honestly. At any rate, that's just my opinion. Let me know yours. What do you think of Justice League Warworld? How psyched are you for Crisis on Infinite Earths? Sound off in the comments below. Meanwhile, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, ring that bell, and hey, follow me on social media as well. So long.